Hello and welcome to the Temples of the Moon Evolutionary Astrology Wisdom School. Today's class is all about the houses of the zodiac, and we're going to go into the gates of initiation. So today I'm going to take you on a journey through the Zodiac Wheel. And we're going to do this in a few different parts. We're going to look into the angles first, the ascendant, descendant, the midheaven, and the IC. And then we're going to go through the lower half of the zodiac and then the upper half of the zodiac. And we're going to look into how the planets in your birth chart, whatever houses they're in, how they basically are activating these areas of your life. And in a very shamanic perspective, it becomes like these territories, the houses of your birth chart that are activated by planets, they become the zone of initiation for you. So in this shamanic perspective, it really goes into how, in evolutionary astrology, it's amazing in the way that it shows us and we see through it, through this lens, that as we are evolving through life, our growth processes, coming more and more into awareness, that we're essentially always moving through what I have come to really witness in people, these rites of passage. So, and this is one of the reasons why I love the lunar cycle so much, because when we track the lunar cycle up against our own lives and our own processes that we're going through, we can really start to acknowledge and identify that we are actually going through a continual process of these rites of passage, these cycles of growth and awareness. So, and this is what's so amazing about the zodiac and about astrology and being able to understand the transits and cycles up against our personal charts, because we then can really identify and see essentially the duration of time that we are going through a certain cycle based on the planet, how long that planet is going to be in an area of our birth chart, whether it's in a house or if a planet is transiting up against a planet in our birth chart. So we can track and see how long that cycle is going to last. And then with the lunar cycle is basically going to activate each month an aspect of that transit, because where the lunar cycle travels through the entire zodiac in a month's time, it makes contact with every single planet. And it makes contact with every house of our birth chart. So if we're going through a Pluto conjunct Chiron in the 9th house transit, every month the moon is going to come to that Chiron Pluto and it's going to activate it. So, these are deeper practices and exercises that one can do as far as tracking the lunar cycle, seeing where it is each day of the month. If you know that you're going through a particular transit, like Pluto conjunct Chiron, then you can just look ahead, find out in the ephemeris when the moon is going, what day of the month that the moon is going to activate that Chiron, and then essentially what that is showing us is it's a day of the cycle that bigger lesson, that bigger soul initiation that Pluto up against Chiron is doing. So Pluto conjunct Chiron is going to be basically about 2 years of a cycle. But there's a good 9 months where it's exact. So it's the coming in and then the moving away. That is about 2 years time. So, and then you can take this further beyond the moon, and you can do the same thing for Venus. When is Venus going to come to that Chiron in the chart and activate that Pluto transit to Chiron, or Mercury or Mars, right? The faster moving planets are going to come around at specific times. But the thing is, Mercury is every 3 weeks moving along to a different sign unless it's retrograde. But with Venus and Mars, it's going to be once a year or so. Once a year and a half, once every 2 years that Venus and Mars come and activate that particular house. So these could be, the month out of the year, or the month in the cycle, that something to be aware of what actually is going to play out, something more significant, more powerful, of basically an evolutionary leap is what we're sort of witnessing, that we do go through these portals of initiation is really how I see them. We get sort of pulled into the energetics of the moment. It's like we're all having this push-pull experience with the universe and what's going on energetically, like the tides. And so we all know this, but astrologers, we have the opportunity to actually track it. And that is what is so amazing and fascinating about this tool of astrology. It is all about time tracking. The cosmic clock is how I look at it. All right, so here we have. So first of all, let's get more familiar with the zodiac wheel itself and the houses. So each house, one of the most significant qualities to remember is that, first of all, the houses, the signs, and the planets all have a synergistic relationship together as far as Mars, Aries, and the first house. They all share an archetype signature. So a planet, we understand planets in a different way than we understand signs, than we understand houses. They are distinct in their sort of purpose that we are working with when we're analyzing the charts, but they share a archetype signature, and that in a way makes it a little easier to understand, to remember. The first house is ruled by Mars. The first house has a Mars energy. So if you understand Mars, you understand the first house. Likewise, Aries. The first house is an Aries signature. So these are just the natural zodiac archetypes. And of course, they're going to change with each person's birth chart. And that's what we come to figure out. What sign is on the cusp of the first house? What sign is on the cusp of the second house? What sign is on the cusp of the third house? So this is all going to condition the character of what we're looking at. But it's really important to understand what the natural energies are of the zodiac to begin with. So then we have that there is the yin and the yang, or the masculine or the feminine, or another way of looking at it as the positive, negative, or the energy going out and energy going in. And so that goes back and forth, beginning with Aries. Mars is it energy going out, it's masculine. And then it goes back and forth throughout the entire zodiac. So energy going out in the first house, energy returning back in the second house, Taurus. Energy going back out in Gemini, third house, energy returning back in Cancer. So another way is it goes masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine. Leo is masculine, Virgo is feminine, Libra is masculine, Scorpio feminine, Sagittarius masculine, Capricorn feminine, Aquarius masculine, Pisces feminine. And the axis will be the same. So the Aries is masculine, Libra is masculine, Taurus second house is feminine, Scorpio is feminine. So, and why this is important to understand, to grasp, because there is so much value in just understanding that with a sign and with a house, that the Taurus nature or the second house nature is to return inward, to go within. So it's an expression, right? It's a type of energetic frequency. The Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, these feminine energy returning in energies, we can see how they are that, right? There's this feminine essence, there's this more internalized, reflective quality that's going on. And then when we take a look at like Aries, Gemini, Leo, it's out, it's active, it's moving around in space. So this that method holds a lot of information when you understand that. So before we began to go into the different angles, let's go through the zodiac and really try to grasp what the houses are. So the houses are the areas of life that we operate. These are the realms of life that we are existing in. I like to call them the gates of initiation, where we are going to be, because when we go through, right, this whole idea of the gateway, we enter into a space, we enter into a realm, and then everything is conditioned by that space, right? It's like we've now entered through the gate, and that's our experience. It's a territory, it's an area, it's an environment of life. And so everything that we experience is going to come through that. When you enter the gate, what is it going to be? Is it going, like, what is the vibe? What are the lessons? What did we just enter? And so the zodiac is representing these 12 territories of life. That is the human experience, in the same way that the signs represent the evolution of consciousness through the evolution of our consciousness through the psyche, right? So this is how we read the signs, this journey through consciousness, through the growth process from one leading to the other. And the houses are representing these territories of life that we enter, and essentially all of life is fitting into these 12 mystery schools. So wherever planets are in the chart, these are going to be those territories that you are working your process through, that you are having your major lessons, that you are really familiar with, really good at. Your abilities, your skills can be in that realm, depending on what planets we're talking about. You know, if we're looking at Chiron, that particular area can be where you actually are struggling in some way, but still there's abilities and there's qualities and there's gifts. So Right. When we look at each one of the houses, there's also a flow that goes on. This chart here was created by Maurice Fernandez. I really appreciate it. So let's go through his definitions, and then I'll add some more. So first house, Mars energy, is all about ignition. It is the I am. The second house is the I have, and it's about incarnation, coming into physical resources and materialized experience, the experience of the material. It's a Venus ruled house. Venus is all about the worldly, physical matters, money, possessions, things, people, the things that we experience. The third house is I think. This is all about navigation, how we move through intellectually integrating in our minds what is going on around us. The fourth house, I nurture. And this is about integration on an emotional level, integrating in. So, and when we take the evolutionary journey to begin, I am, I have, I think, and then I feel or I nurture. I integrate the space and the essentially the components of the mechanism of how we respond, the I am, the I have, the I think, into the emotional body. How does all that translate on the deeper, most inner world? Then we have the fifth house, the Leo house, ruled by the sun, which is I create. And this is all about creation. Mercury, the Virgo house, fruits of labor, work effort, I serve. Libra, the seventh house, consideration, consideration for others, I partner. Eighth house, Scorpio, Pluto, Mars was the original ruler, I circulate. He has repowerment. The I circulate has to do with essentially this circulation of energy, this house of union and deep merging. It's also about reciprocation, the give and the take experience that Taurus, Scorpio, second house, eighth house deeply experiences. Then we have the ninth house expansion, the I explore. The 10th house, I achieve. Alignment. I really appreciate this alignment, opposite integration, because as we emotionally integrate how we feel about what's going on, then the next stage is to alignment in that and to be able to show up. This is the house of status, social status, and to be able to show up in the world. Then we have the 11th house, elevation. This is the I aspire. And then Neptune, the 12th house, I dream. And he has the cosmic womb, relationship with life in its totality, the last harvest. So again, this is the last house. It's that dark moon energy. The last harvest is a really beautiful way of looking at it, like the balsamic phase of the moon, where we essentially we gather the rest of it. We gather the rest of our what's there to be gained, what's there to be learned from in this sort of last stage. So and when we are tracking planets, again, there is, like the evolution of the signs, how we can see this evolutionary journey in the signs. Aries is the birth into the physical, the forming of the ego and identity. Taurus is grounding into your own personal values. Gemini is going back out in gathering more information from coming out of a stage of consolidation in Taurus. And so there's the journey. that one leads to the next, and the houses also are going to represent that. So when you track a planet like Jupiter, for instance, Jupiter is a 12-year cycle that stays 1 year in each house. So you can see that we get taken on this growth journey. And, we're using language here, but essentially are we being taken, or is it just representing, right? It's representing that as beings, as souls on this earth, there naturally is an evolutionary journey of growth that we are all moving through. And astrology and the birth charts and the movements of the planets are representing this. So there is that going on. Without being able to track the planets and to know astrology, it's still happening. A person is still going to have Jupiter in the first house, whether they know it or not. So Jupiter in the first house, this year where expansion in the house of my identity. What do I want? What do I desire? What kind of experiences am I going for? And then after that year, into the second house of, okay, now that was a lot. That was a lot of external, outward experience. Now I'm going to go inward and I'm going to consolidate and I'm going to get more in touch with my values, what I really want to do beyond just the instinct to go out and experience for the sake of experience, to sort of go through the process of elimination around, the first house Aries Mars is trying to figure out who am I through a process of elimination. And so in Taurus, it's having been figured out right now and consolidating into, I know this is what I want, what I don't want, and that's what I'm going to be. So it's deepening into values that one can now sort of claim. And then you can see, so the next stage, naturally, if Jupiter is the planet, it moves into the third house, and now we go back out and we get taken out of that sort of safe nest of stability and getting deeper in touch with ourself that Taurus just took us into, the second house. And now it's about, well, there's more. So it's time to go out and open yourself to more information to expand yourself, essentially. And then the fourth house will take us back in to the self. And then the fifth house will take us back out into more outward experience. And then the sixth house will take us back in. And it's all this from one to the next, this deeply integrative experience. And we get initiated through these zones. And so whatever they mean, that's where the initiation is happening. So let's take some examples. The angles are considered points, and they are incredibly powerful gateways. So you want to give them the importance that they deserve. If you have a planet, if a birth chart shows a planet on any one of the angles, or if a transiting planet is crossing over any one of the angles, these are very, very powerful cycles and initiatory times of a person's story. So the ascendant is the cusp of the first house. It is the beginning. It represents a brand new cycle that is underway now after the closure of an entire cycle. So again, depending on the planet, how long, what's the impact of this, you'll want to determine. But the first house, the ascendant, if you're born with a planet here or a planet passing over, you know that when a planet is passing over, this is more of the, this is a time period of life that you are being initiated into a big cycle of beginnings, a brand new cycle of beginning on the quality of who am I? What is my identity now? What kind of experiences do I want now? And if you have a planet, if you're born with a planet on the ascendant, then there's a constant experience going on around the who am I in relation to that archetype. So if it's the moon, who am I on this deep emotional level? The person is going to be incredibly lunar. They're going to be deeply in touch with the emotional body, with being psychic, with being receptive, with nurturing, with all things moon, with nurturing, healing, food, comfort, needs, vulnerabilities. This is going to be a powerful journey that highly dominates their life in a way. The first house is really powerful because it is the first and because it is this who am I component. So, we're all having this experience of identifying with ourselves. And we're constantly in confrontation with the world and how others experience us. So it's a powerful transit when this happens. When a transit is happening to the ascendant, we know that we're in a life stage of our life where we are changing. We're changing our identity. We're changing how we're showing up in the world. And so it can also be confusing. It can be, I like to think of it as the identity crisis portal. And depending on what planet, if it's Saturn, it's going to be a bit more challenging. There's that real confrontation that is all about, it's a lot more stern and, the cold hand of judgment and reality with Saturn. If it's Jupiter, then we're going to get more of an essence of the expansion of the identity. Things are getting bigger and bigger. There's more opportunities. There's things coming in. There can be wisdom. There can be the teacher aspect that goes on with Jupiter, right? These kind of things. So depending on what the planet is, this is what. So ascendant, school of awareness, self-identity, what needs to be realized in personality and accomplishing the soul intention. So the soul intention that we see from the Pluto, the north and south node of the moon, the ascendant is going to be an extension of that. So depending what sign you have on your ascendant, the first house is where we experience ourself in order to sort of answer the question of who am I and what do I identify with. And so if Aries is on the first house, then, the question becomes, the first house is an energy of the who am I, that how to understand that is like, are you someone who wants to scale a mountain? Or are you someone who would not scale a mountain? Are you someone who wants to go out into the deep sea, or are you someone who does not ever want to go out into the deep sea? Right? These are these things of like, what do you want to experience? This who am I? And it changes depending on the person. So Aries on the ascendant, this can very much be someone who has a fire, a boldness, a lot of courage. It could be a force of energy that is very athletic, aggressive. This could be the boxer energy or the athlete or, someone who is wanting to scale the mountain. But then if we go and put Taurus on the ascendant, they're going to want things to be a lot more comfortable for them, maybe a lot more aesthetic. More peaceful, more calm, maybe more solitude. Cancer on the ascendant, there's more of the I am nurturing. That's the experience. That's how I like to experience myself. That's the kind of places that I'm going to take myself to have the experience. So, it's like wherever we are, wherever we go, there we are. It's like, so we're going to take that. So to understand the difference between, this first house, the house of experience. So you're going to go places, and it's not that you can't go, like if a Cancer rising does decide to go scale a mountain, they're going to bring that Cancer sort of I amness with them. And so, they're going to have a lot of snacks. They're going to make sure they get the food and the water, and maybe they're going to take it at their own pace. They're not going to, Taurus can be like this too. Aries is just going to like gun it up the mountain. They want to feel like the intensity of their muscles and power, and like how fast they can get there and how fierce they can be, right? It's all about power. But Taurus, Cancer, not so much like that, right? It's going to be there's a focus of how they're experiencing their identity and what they're experiencing. So that's the other thing with Cancer. Cancer might be like, I don't really want to scale the mountain. I just want to like hang out on the beach while you guys scale the mountain. Like I'll watch from here kind of thing. So it's like, that's how, so it has to do with how they're going to be in the experiences they have, but also how they feel about whether or not they're going to want to do those experiences. Okay. Because it's the realization of self. It's an outward active energy that's going on. So how am I in the experiences? How am I going to be? How am I going to relate to them? And then which ones will I allow myself to go on and which ones won't I? And this is all, there's a lot of complexity when we look into the whole chart, but this is, to try to get the foundational of how to begin to understand and interpret. So with the descendant, as the ascendant is this instinctual quality of the self-image and the identity, we just instinctually feel and express our ascendant as this nature of our identity that is instinctual. I just am this way. I just, as personally, I'm a Cancer. So as a Cancer, I just instinctually am attuned to the emotional reality and to nurturing. Like, is everybody okay? Am I okay? Do we need to make anything okay? There's that going on, no matter where I take myself. And so the descendant, the cusp of the seventh house, the house of others, is how we instinctually are attracted, what type of people we're instinctually attracted to, the quality that attracts us in life. So the soul's relationship intention, what one is instinctually attracted to in another. So when a planet is transiting over the descendant, this is going to be a powerful time of an initiatory lesson into others, into the realm of the seventh house, the house of other people. So when it's crossing over the descendant, that is a real power point of potency of, the angles themselves, of course, they're their own point. They're different from the house, but they are the gateway to the house, right? So we understand that. So the descendant, what's happening in the seventh house is what's happening on the descendant. But the crossing over into the descendant is the potency point. So when a planet is crossing over the descendant, that's where the real activation is happening. As it goes further into the seventh house, you're still having a seventh house experience, but it's not as potent as when it's crossing over the descendant, unless, of course, it's going to hit a planet in that seventh house, for instance, and then that will be different. But again, likewise, if a planet is in the first house or in the seventh house or in any house, it is very different, or it is more powerful when the planet is on the ascendant than it is when it's in the first house, or on the descendant than when it's already in. It's just, again, it has to do with degrees and the power of the concentration of how tight the angle or the aspect is. So planets entering the descendant, the seventh house, it's becomes, rather than the ascendant, who am I, this new cycle I'm beginning, the descendant, who are you? And it is also the beginning of a new cycle. That's something to be really aware of, because the first 6 houses are the lower hemisphere, and the second 6 houses are the upper hemisphere. And so when a planet crosses over the descendant, you are completing a cycle of however long that planet took to traverse the first through 6, which is the inner development of self. And the 6 through 12 is the social development. So Saturn crosses over the ascendant, and it takes 14 years for it to go through the whole 6 houses. So when Saturn crosses up into the 7th house, that's the completion of a 14-year cycle of deep inner revelation, deep inner processing, inner lessons, which are represented by the 1st through 6th house, the inner self. So when Saturn crosses up into the 7th house, is a very powerful transitional moment, a new beginning into the social sphere after 14 years of having a deep journey through the self. So this is a whole cycle in itself that is so powerful to chart, the Saturn cycle, knowing when Saturn crosses the ascendant and the descendant, and you know that that 14 years is represented by such a powerful journey, either through the inner self or through the social realms. And Saturn trying to teach us more about self responsibility and personal power. So when when you're born with the planet on the descendant, this becomes incredibly powerful as far as every relationship you go into, you take that planet. You know, in the same way that the ascendant, if there's a planet on the ascendant, that is so deeply part of your identity, your essence, your instinctual essence of self. It's like the filters, right? Astrology really shows us the filters that we are experiencing our self journey through. And so that's another way of looking at, when you're looking at a personal chart, whatever sign is ruling the house is the filter of that house. So let's say that your 3rd house has Virgo on the cusp of the 3rd house. Whether you have planets in it or no planets, that's not what we're talking about right now. Just being able to determine another layer and quality of that territory of your life. So that's how you want to look at another way, another layer of looking at the house qualities, these 12 mystery schools of life that we all go through. So if you have a planet in that house, then that's a really powerful area that you're focused. And then the transits of the planets will always be bringing us into all the territories throughout our life. So some of us are oriented in certain areas. That's where we're going to spend a lot of time. But regardless of whether you have a planet or not, we're still all navigating these same 12 mystery schools of life. And the transiting planets will activate those times for us at different periods. So when there's a planet on the descendant, that planet is going to very much shape the quality of your relationships. Okay, sorry. I was talking about when there's a sign. Let me complete that thought. The sign of I was going to use the example of Virgo on the third house. So you want to look at all of the houses and see what signs are on there, because that sign has a real quality of that territory of your life. So Virgo on the third house, the house of I think, the house of how I am integrating into my environment. So with Virgo on it, it's very analytical. It's someone who pays a lot of attention to the details of their environment. If we put Cancer on that third house, then that person is going to, again, have this sort of taking that nurturing quality, taking the quality of safety and security into that space. So Leo on the third house cusp, there can be a more playful, how can I, it can be a more self-expressive. I want to express myself in this territory of life. Another technique of gaining more information of a house is you look at the sign that's on the cusp and what is ruling that sign. So for instance, let's take Sagittarius on the third house cusp. So this person integrates into their environment in a Sagittarian way. It's a higher mind, it's intuitive. There can be the need to explore on a more philosophical nature. To really understand the bigger picture and meaning around what's going on in their environment, because there's a Sagittarius essence going on of how they integrate into their environment. And then the ruler of that third house, Sagittarius, is Jupiter. So then where is Jupiter in their chart? So let's say Jupiter is in the fifth house, in Aquarius. So then we take that, and that the way that person integrates that Sagittarius on the third house, they bring philosophy into their environment. They're sort of looking through the lens of what is the meaning, what is the truth. There can be this multicultural gypsy kind of, integrating the different elements of culture and belief into space, into how they're navigating their environment. And then we take that Jupiter now in the fifth house, and when you understand what's going on with that sign, so the Jupiter in the fifth house is now, it's very creative. It's the way they creatively express themselves through a philosophical sort of notion. And so that's just another layer. If someone has Capricorn on the eighth house is about intimacy and deeper soulmate relationships. So they'll bring a very Capricorn quality in. There'll be a sense of maturity. There'll be a sense of commitment and devotion in their most intimate relationships. And then where is their Saturn? So let's say Saturn is in the sixth house. Then that's an extension of that eighth house territory that is now conditioned by Capricorn for them. So Saturn in the sixth house is, additionally, they are that quality of maturity and devotion and commitment in their most intimate connections and soulmate relationships. With Saturn in the sixth house now, they can be very devotional. It can be focused on sixth house things, healing, that they bring into their intimacy a sense of needing to do things very well, right? The sixth house is about wholeness and health and healing. It's the house of the disciple student. So this constant need to be learning and approving. So they'll bring that into relationships, that comes into the deeper relationships, that their Saturn quality, that Capricorn quality now in the 6th house. So already I'm sure you're getting the understanding around the depth of being able to analyze the condition of a house in this way. So the midheaven is very powerful. When you're born with a planet on the midheaven, that planet archetype is going to be very prominent in what your role in society becomes. How people experience you showing up in the world, and essentially what you want to do and how you do it, what your career is, what your work is. So if someone has Mercury or Jupiter, those are the teachers, those are the communicators. If someone has Uranus on the midheaven, very revolutionary, very rebellious. So that, that can take its own course on the whole spectrum of how that there could be a rebellion against authority, against the work structures, or they can show up in the work structures in that way, pioneering something revolutionary. Technology is connected to the Uranus, so it can be someone who's into science or technology, these kind of things. Neptune on the midheaven, someone who's highly spiritual, who's bringing in something very, very spiritual, or someone who's famous or highly, creative, like an artist or a musician, that Neptunian. I know Oprah Winfrey has Neptune in her 10th house. So being able to touch the masses in the same way, in some way, is Neptune. So, and another thing, the angles represent the skeleton of being. So they're deeply personal. Even though the midheaven, the 10th house, represents the outer world, the descendant represents other people, the skeleton of the being that these angles represent, the who am I, the who are you, the my inner world and the outer world, we always want to remember that even though the descendant is other people, the midheaven is the outer world experience. It first is about the angles themselves, are about how we are responding to that. So how the descendant, how we're responding to the other, the midheaven, how we're responding and experiencing the outer world experience. So you can see how powerful these are when a planet transits the midheaven. Also, again, very powerful portal times of initiation into what are you doing in society? How are you showing up in society? What is your contribution? So again, I want to mention, like I've mentioned many times before, that not everybody is destined to have a particular job or career, which is what essentially the midheaven represents, or the 10th house represents. And so sometimes people will have like a north node in the 10th house, and they're a stay-at-home parent. And so their role, their position is incredibly significant, as far as the impact they have on their society, on their tribe, right? On that social experience that they're having. They have a powerful position and role there. So we want to keep that in mind, because when a planet, like say this is a person who has been a stay-at-home parent for decades, and now they have Saturn or Jupiter crossing over the midheaven, it doesn't mean all this. It's like, so how do we determine that? It's not about, oh, your career or your work or your your role in the world. It's different. So we want to know that, because if you read anything out there on the web about the 10th house, it's always going to be referring to career and work and and that kind of thing. It's not always the way for people. Someone could have a North Node in the 10th house, and it is about their family. It's about the position they play in their family, the role they play in the family. And so a transiting planet is going to be about how we are deepening into our own sense of personal authority, integrity, sovereignty, self-leadership, self-motivation, all these things that the 10th house mean. And so it's a time of initiation through that experience, through those archetypes, through those lessons. If you have a career, if you have work, then that's where those lessons are going to be showing up or coming through. And that's another thing to keep in mind with transiting planets. Whatever planet is transiting through a certain territory, life will bring that. So when we look at a birth chart, if we have a lot going on in the 7th house, we have a stellium of planets in the 7th house, and we involve ourselves in relationships. When a planet is transiting the 7th house, relationships come to us. So when a planet is transiting, it's like the universe is bringing that to us. So the universe, our connection to the bigger whole and the larger process that we're all moving through, the planet brings the planet itself becomes bigger in your life. So Jupiter moving through the 1st house, more of Jupiter. You start to get taught by, it's like the guide of Jupiter that has showed up in your world. If Pluto is moving through the 7th house, then very Plutonic experiences via relationships show up. You essentially become more Plutonic. Uranus moving through an area, you're getting taught through the lessons of Uranus. You're getting taught by the teacher, by the guide of Uranus at that particular time. So it shows up more prominent. And I would say that this is always happening regardless of the house. But there is a like a gauge to that too. You know, the 1st house is the who am I? So any planet going through the 1st house, it does actually get bigger in your personality. You know, Uranus comes to the ascendant, travels through the 1st house for 7 years. You become more Uranian. You know, that is the process that's happening. It's like the guide of Uranus comes and is like right there. Who am I? Uranus. Who am I? Uranus. It's just a process that you are becoming more of that archetype. That's your teacher. That's your school. That's the journey. And so Uranus going through the 7th house, likewise, that is happening. You're going to become more of this Uranian quality, but now it's through others. You attract in Uranian type of people. The relationships have this Uranian type of quality, right? Or Saturn. Saturn comes to the 7th house, and then now relationships get more serious. You and the relationship you're in need to up level. You need to get more discipline. You need to face the reality of the problems that are happening. You need to put more effort into the relationship, or you attract in more Saturnian type of people. A lot of times people meet the relationship. They meet the serious relationship, the one that is going to now be something more serious when Saturn comes through the descendant. So that is really powerful to witness when this is what's happening. You get, and that's also what I mean about the gateway of the territory. There's a gateway of the territory. So you're having that 7th house lesson for however long that it's like you've entered the realm and the territory of that region, and that is going to define the cycle of that season, that chapter of your life. And the next layer of that is, what is the planet? Because that's also going to be the conditioning quality of that archetype that you're trying to learn and develop through at that time. So let's move on to taking now some of the other archetypes through. So if we have, again, we want to look at this through the lens of what you have in that house, in your natal chart, and then what is transiting through it. So these are the moving planets. These are the personal planets, the sun, the moon, Venus, Mars, and Mercury. So let's take Mars, for instance, the warrior of the soul, fighting for its desires to be known and actualized, for personal growth, sovereignty, position, and power. So if Mars is in the 7th house, a person can be bringing that Mars quality to the 7th house. If it's in their natal chart, they show up with that. They're going to fight for their partner. They can also be fighting with the partner, right? There's this push and pull tug experience where they're always trying to assert themselves, always trying to assert their will in the relationship. And that's going to be sort of neutralized and balanced through time, depending on what's going on, of course, but that's part of the leading dynamic. Someone has Mars in the 1st house, they are going to, that willful initiative, take action quality is there. Now, it also determines what sign it's in. So Mars in Taurus in the 1st house, they are going to be asserting their need and will for Taurus, to be calm, to have solitude, to create harmony, to live in their comfort zones. That's what they're going to, and because it's in the 1st house now, it's essential to their identity that they do this. It's prominent, it's like it's always there. Is this comfortable for me? And how do I am determined to create that for an experience for me. So there's a intensity about having Mars in the 1st house. Pluto in the 1st house, similar. They are deeply needing to assert themselves, their will, their soul mission, and their power into their experiences. And as they do that, they are learning more about themselves. So depending on what planet, what sign is happening, this is going to determine the type of initiation that's going on in that region. So if we have a stellium in the 2nd house, this person is born, if they're born, the natal chart has a stellium in the 2nd house, they're going to be someone who has a lot of their psyche oriented towards going inward, to finding that center, to finding that stillness, to being someone their life is highly functioning around what they know as their value system. The 2nd house is where we really ground and root in, and it's a fixed house. So this is another quality that we always want to keep in mind. The element and the quality of the house. Is it a cardinal fire? Is it fixed earth? So if there's a stellium in the 2nd house, is fixed earth nature that is going to go on around. They're learning through the fact that they are fixed in what they want, what they feel, what they value. So it's someone who's going to have deep values. And so there's the positive and there's the negative, which they'll grow through in that realm, that there'll be someone who is deeply rooted in what they care for, what they believe in. And that is the very nature of where they can get stuck. It's a fixed house. So the 2nd house represents the territory where we will always have to confront our stagnancy. So when people have planets in the first house, in the second house, that's what we see, that they are so committed. They are so fixed in this zone. But then where is it that they are needing to allow themselves to grow in this area? Because it shows that they've taken this component of getting so deeply rooted in themselves and being fixed so deep that that's where they themselves can be stuck now. The stagnancy of having gone so deep into rooting. You know, it's that oak tree energy. It's like you cannot knock it down. It cannot be uprooted. It's so very deeply integrated into the person. And so that's when we see a stellium in the second house, it can be that, wow, this person is got a lot of stability, a lot of commitment and devotion to what it is they're focused on. But then we want to look at where can they potentially be stuck or stagnant in this area, because it is representing an evolutionary stage of growth that is now, they're now needing to look at where they are potentially stuck or limiting their own growth. Because, you know, it's the idea that we learn through this certain territories and zones of life. Like Taurus, we're learning how to be more committed, how to have deep values, how to be deeply rooted in ourselves, how to be unwavering in our sense of self. But then when do we reach this sort of limit to that? And maybe we take it too far. Now we're stubborn. Now we can't be, we're immovable. Now we won't allow any other beliefs in. Now we won't allow ourselves to change. And of course, we can see how Scorpio pulls Taurus out of itself. Scorpio rocks the boat of Taurus and says, wait, there's more. You have to let go. You have to come out of yourself. And you have to try something else. So we see this. Let's take it to the faster moving planets. So moving on now to, let's say, the third house. Planets in the third house are going to represent an initiation going on with the soul on a deeper level around where the person is highly focused on information and communication. So sun in the first house, or sun in the third house, rather, the person is all about communication, all about information, all about integration into their environment. It's really important that they're understanding what's going on around them. And let's take Jupiter into the third house. So now the planet of wisdom, the planet of the teacher, the planet of exploration beyond into the expansiveness of ourself and life in the third house. It's going to now be conditioning this realm. It's all about going into deeper levels of self-knowing in the third house, of educating themselves and also likely educating those around them. This deep need to integrate information and communication at a higher level with Jupiter. When we have a planet transiting the third house, so depending on the planet, Jupiter transiting the third house, this is a time of being initiated through education and information. The person can be expanding into more information, more knowledge, becoming the teacher, being gravitated towards the teacher. If Saturn is in the third house, then it's a time where they're needing to get more disciplined in this area. Maybe they're needing to focus with more discipline and devotion and self-led responsibility in school, in educating themselves, or maybe they're needing to up level their own ability, if how they're showing up, if they are the teacher in that realm. If it's Chiron, then it can bring in this element of healing, bringing in that, Chiron represents healing. It represents the pain body. It represents the wound. So this is going to characterize the territory of their life. Chiron will stay in an area for about 7 years. So wherever Chiron is going to transit, it's going to bring in that quality of the journey through the wound in some way. If a person has a stellium in a house and Chiron is moving through, it's going to activate it even more. And again, remembering that a planet in transit is essentially bringing us deeper into that archetype, that we become more familiar with that archetype, or we literally become the archetype embodied even more. It depends also, I think if someone has a very strong Chiron in the chart, Chiron conjunct the South Node, Chiron conjunct the Sun, then a transit of Chiron through a house, they do become that even more because they already are that signature. But let's say Chiron isn't so prominent in a person's chart natally, and then they're having Chiron go through the 8th or the 9th house, they're going to have deeper lessons of the Chiron. They are becoming more of that archetype essentially in some way. But again, you just want to gauge this differently by understanding the natal chart. If someone has Saturn on the North Node, Saturn on the Sun during the Saturn transits, they're already born to embodied in that archetype. So therefore the transit represents a deeper embodying of that archetype, way more personalized for that person who has that signature that strong. Uranus moving through the houses. Uranus is a 7-year journey. So it's a much longer initiation. It's a much longer process. And so Uranus moving through the 4th house. When Uranus hits the IC, this is going to bring in, what does Uranus represent? Big change, radical change, out of the blue change, out of the blue experiences. It can also represent an up leveling into higher awareness. Remember, Uranus is the higher mind. It can tap in to higher consciousness. It can bring, it's the planet also of enlightenment, to be able to tap higher levels of awareness, to be objective, to be able to see the full picture objectively. So it depends where the person already is in their relationship. If someone has Uranus very strong already in their character, then it's just the next evolution, because that's essentially what we're looking at here, the evolutionary journey through time and space and how we are connecting to it, where we are in relationship to our own process. So if someone is already very Uranian, going through their own highly creative processes, highly responsive to going through more and more awareness and awakening as a life pattern in their life, then wherever Uranus is, that's now the new realm. Here's where the awakening comes. Here's where the awareness comes. Here's where the higher creativity comes. But not everybody is in that process. Not everybody is relating to their life in this highly creative way. Not everybody is relating to life as greater and greater expansion of awareness. That's the quality of Uranus, but not everyone is working that dynamic. So Uranus, if a person is not working that dynamic on that sort of higher level, then wherever Uranus is, it can bring that more in for them. It can bring that creative quality more in, depending on where it is, whatever house it's going through. So Uranus crossing over the ascendant, or the Uranus crossing over the ascendant is really powerful. It's a liberation of who am I. It's a radical change and transformation as far as identity. So it's a very big process that someone goes through when that happens. Also, when any of the angles, really, Uranus comes into the IC, that can be a lot of changes that go on in the home, the deep inner world, the most personal. So you know that person is going to be up leveling in awareness and orientation of how the bigger picture of how they're seeing. But for some people, it can be depending, right? Because we know the evolutionary states of consciousness, the Saturn realm of the consensus, the Uranus realm of the individuated, and the Neptune realm of the spiritual. So if a person who is in the Saturn realm of the consensus consciousness, a Uranus comes over the fourth house, and we can assume that what's going to happen is a lot changes on the physical realm, the Saturn realm. So changes in the home, changes in the family, changes how they're relating to the family on deeper levels. It can be creativity can certainly come in, awareness can certainly come in. If someone is more in the individuated or spiritual stages, then Uranus comes to the fourth house and they start really addressing what's not right in their home space where they live. They want to move, they want to live somewhere else, they want to be their most intimate bonds, their family. There's disruption, right? Uranus is the great disruptor. It's going to really shake things up. It's like breaking the walls down, and it can be intense, right? The lightning bolt is the signature, but also just like I see the brick wall that's crumbled. Uranus comes in and breaks down the barriers to eliminate conditioning that's happening. So you always want to consider with Uranus, it's a deconditioning. So an initiation through a deconditioning process through whatever that arena is. So the fourth house, the deep most inner self, the fifth house, the creative expression, the sixth house, a deeper identification with skills and abilities, a refinement of self, essentially leading to service. The seventh house, how one is showing up with the relationship and partnership. The eighth house, the deeper, intimate soul experiences in relationship, the things that really are powerful, the powerful effect people have on us and the power we have on another, essentially the death birth cycle, how someone can ultimately change us. The presence of someone, these are all very eighth house, the presence of someone different from seventh house. Seventh house is just, we can go to work and be around, we can have coworkers that don't necessarily change us on a soul level, right? We just sort of interact with them every day. There's a personality thing that goes on, but the eighth house is where relationships, the person has such an immense impact on you and you on them. And so we are changed, we are deeply merged, and we go through processes of growth and, death and rebirth together. The ninth house, expansion into more of, so Jupiter is the natural ruler of the ninth house. When we enter the realm of the ninth house in transit, we are that quality of our ability to perceive that there is more beyond into the infinite realms, and where we seek to expand through our vision, through our dreams, through our intentions into more. So this is the realm. So when we have planets transiting this area, we're being pulled to more and more expansion. And the journey from the eighth to the ninth is so incredible because the eighth house pulls us into the depths of the underworld, into what is deeply, deeply there. And we go through the seeing what we're so deeply attached to and what we need to release. And then we get taken into the 9th house, and we go into now expanding beyond, expanding our own consciousness beyond what is already there. So when people are born with a stellium in the 9th house, they are all about, or Sagittarius, but in the 9th house, they're all about expansion into more. So this can be people who love to travel, the actual planet, or these can be the highly philosophical people searching for the truth, searching for the meaning. As so that is the journey. The 10th house is going to take us into where we are needing to orient into society, how we all need to contribute. So that the 10th house Capricorn, it is all about leadership, but essentially we don't all get to a level of, leadership in a sense, but we all do need to learn how to self-lead. And that's what the 10th house Saturn Capricorn is all about. So transiting planets or stelliums in the 10th house, this person is learning at that time how to be more self-led, what it takes to commit, to be devotional, to follow through, to get the job done. So that becomes a journey. And essentially, depending, if a person has a stellium in the 10th house, then they are all about being out there in the world and doing that process, doing that thing. Depending on the planet, of course, if it's a north node, they really need to learn this. That's really where they need to keep pulling themselves. If there's a stellium of other planets, then they likely already know, they already have these qualities deeply embedded within them, and they're naturally being called to show up in life this way as essentially a contribution. The 10th house is the contribution in the similar way that Virgo in the 6th house is the contribution. We figure out what we can do and what we have to offer and what our service is, and then we give it. And with the 10th house, we provide it. It becomes provision. And at higher levels, we end up leading with it. Others follow because we are showing the possibility of it being done. And then, so the 11th house is now the fruits of our labor from the 10th house. It's where we have gathered all the quality, the talent, the creative genius is there. So if someone is born with a stellium, they're being initiated through creativity, the axis of the 5th and 11th, through actualizing their genius and expressing it, keeping in mind that the 10th, 11th, 12th, these are where we are pulled out into society. So the 11th house is a realm, it's opposite the 5th, where we are tapping into our creative process, but in the 11th, we are actually in the world with it. So if a person has planets going through the 11th house, that's where they're being initiated. They're being initiated into the realm of how well they're tapping into their creative genius and creative expression. So let's take Jupiter, for instance, because Jupiter is a faster moving planet to track. Jupiter in the 10th house, we're working hard that year. We're figuring out how to be more committed, how to show up more, how to produce more, how to follow through more, how to be more mature. All of these things, all the things that it takes to actually produce and show up and have things to offer, have, to be the provider. You have to be the provider, you would have had to go through all of the effort and work it takes to get what it is that you're providing. And so that archetype of Saturn knows that, has done that, is there. And so Jupiter going through the 10th house, you're in that process, you're working that in a very expansive way. Now Jupiter goes through the 11th house, and you're going to throw off any conditioning that you've picked up along the way, because now the 11th house is the liberate from society, liberate, let go, take it to the next level, but the process of taking it to the next level is about releasing anything that is conditioning or not true to the self, so that you can live that experience of pure expression of the individualized nature. Because we're on this journey now that we began the socialization at the 7th house, deepened it in the 8th house, Scorpio, expanded it into more of the socialized experience in the 9th house, really got disciplined with it in the 10th house as far as alignment, how we can align with it, how we can really be of service and a contribution in it in whatever way we can. Again, we don't have to be leaders, but we do have to show up. And that's what Capricorn Saturn teaches everybody. You do have to show up in some way. You got to be able to take care of things. I mean, not everybody, there are situations in life where not everybody can take care, and that would be their specific journey, right? That they're not capable for whatever reasons, handicaps and things like this. So the 11th, deepening into creative expression and one's own unique individualized nature, until eventually we let it go. We let it go completely in the 12th house Pisces, and we merge. So another very popular term, I'm quite sure there was a book that's probably about 40 years old by now. It's called, I think it's called the 12th house, the house of self-undoing. And it was there wasn't a lot of Neptune 12th house books a couple decades ago. But I really like that term, the house of self-undoing, because that is the Neptune Pisces 12th house reality. So the 12th house, if someone has planets in the 12th house, this is the house of spirit. This is the house of spiritualization. So not everybody connects with being spiritual, but everybody has a spiritual nature. There is the spiritual realm that exists. So then it becomes, how are they relating to it? So people that we know, we can identify as they're on a very spiritual path. Then we interpret it like that, like, okay, sun in the 12th house, they're deeply focused on the spiritual experience. But then we see some people with sun in the 12th house who are not connected to living a spiritual life. And that can be that on the one hand, it can be that they're avoiding it, denying it, or just overwhelmed. Like, I don't want to be in that realm. That can be stelliums in the 12th house, can be an escapism from the subtle energies, it can also be, 12th house can also really show up as escapism from the physical, right? People who don't want to take responsibility, don't want to be on the density of the earth plane. And so they escape into, addictions. And, some people believe that we all have addictions of some nature, that, to be physical is difficult. To be spiritual beings on the physical plane is difficult. And so we all sort of reach for something to escape, or to ground. It's usually that, although alcohol and drugs can be sort of a different, because that doesn't necessarily ground a person, but takes them into a different realm, so that I don't want to be here. I'm going to go somewhere else. So that escapist quality can be very powerful of the 12th house, the not wanting to be here. And then it can be the other side of that, which is so incredibly wanting to be in the spiritual realms, just wanting to be there. So that can also be the whole experience around drug addiction and alcoholism. I just want to be there. I just want to be in that realm where I'm high all the time. But then it can also be on the spiritual planes, people who are on spiritual missions and studying spirituality and whatnot. We'll see that And so transits through the 12th house are going to be activating this arena of life. So it's going to bring in a more spiritualized quality. It's going to bring people more in touch with the other side. It's the house of the unconscious. So it's going to bring the unconscious more into awareness. So I like to say that it's an unearthing. When transits happen, they activate the unconscious, and therefore it gets released into consciousness, and we start becoming aware of the unconscious, because it's a lesson. It's an initiation through the unconscious. So we start getting more conscious of the unconscious realms, of the psychic realms. We can get more in touch with our own escapism. We can get activated into more of our spiritual body, our spiritual essence. We can go deep into the past, because, that's a big portal of the unconscious. It's also a water house, so it's connected to the bonds. The 4th house, the 8th house, the 12th house connects us to the bonds of others. So the 12th house can take us back into the ancestry, back into our past, into the past of our parents, these kind of things. So I want to complete this class today with, I found this on this website here, and I really appreciated it because with the shamanic perspective that I work with in my work with astrology, I very much connect to the rites of passage journey and the hero's journey. And so I think this is really cool, the way this person has designed this connection between the hero's journey and the zodiac. And I have also always connected the hero's journey to the lunar cycle, which I have in the next slide that I'll show. But the hero's journey, for me, I feel like we're all on that journey. We're all living through our own hero's journey, and the lunar cycle itself. I feel like we have these mini hero's journeys that happen, and then we have the whole scope of our entire lifetime that is the ultimate journey. And so each month we can be traveling through and be confronted with yet another bigger piece of our puzzle and a bigger aspect of our journey of self that we have to confront and overcome. And then we sort of return back home to ourselves, having grown through that journey. And I feel that we are going through these every single month, but we can definitely track the moments in our journey, or the moments in the year that are the most profound initiations that we go through. And so here we have the call to adventure with, and just keeping in mind, the zodiac is not exactly the way we normally see it. It's going the other direction, but that's okay. We can work with that. So Aries, the call to adventure. Taurus, the refusal of the call. And Gemini, the supernatural aid. So I really appreciate this, right? That the beginning, the impulse to grow, to go on something else, that we get pulled into the need to go out and expand more. And then we can doubt that. Wait, I'm not ready. I don't know if I really want this. And the refusal of the call, which is a very Taurus quality. And then we move beyond that, and we realize that there are others. There are others that have been on this journey, or there are other things that we can connect to help guide us. And then the crossing of the threshold. So we have here the first threshold from when we begin. And then we cross the threshold into Cancer, where we we have to move beyond, once again, out of our comfort zone, out of what we think is safe, out of our security, out of potentially the what we're connected to, the people. We're now moving into more growth and more expansion, and we're going to let people go, or we're going to keep them with us. But in one way, we confront this crossing of the threshold of our emotional attachments and safety and security issues. And then in Leo, the road of trials, where we really face the what is required of us on an active level. We have to get ready to face more of the obstacles physically. And then we come to the Virgo and the Libra, which she has here as the meeting with the goddess and the woman as temptress. So this is where we literally meet the dragon, where we really face our obstacle. And the meeting with the goddess is that sort of transmutation process that goes on where we realize our strength. We have to go deeper. We once again confront our weaknesses and our perceived limitation that the dragon or the great obstacle presents itself to us, and we don't know that we can actually take it down, that we can succeed, that we will survive. And so there can be an immense amount of doubt when we get to that level. And again, keeping in mind that this hero's journey is always our process of initiation through our own rites of passage that essentially expand our consciousness and therefore expand our own personal container of what we can hold in life, what we can endure in life, what we can meet in life. Because we know we're always through that journey, going on that journey. Like, how well can we show up? And we can't, to a degree, depending on where we're at, until we sort of confront and heal and go through these channels, these gateways. And then we have overcome it. And now we can take more, and now we can take more, and we can take more. And we keep on expanding our own capacity to hold life, the container of life, and to show up in life. So this Virgo, Libra, really confronting the dragon. And then we come to the Scorpio, the atonement with the father, and then the Sagittarius, the ultimate boon. So this is the part of having already now conquered the obstacle, having now conquered the dragon within, and we begin the descent of returning back home. And we come to this place of depth of integrating this Scorpio. I like the way that this shows this, first the meeting with the mother and the essence of the mother, and then the meeting with the father. Like we integrate on this emotional level into ourselves the accomplishment of where we have succeeded. It's very, very deeply personal. And then this atonement to the father in Scorpio, that we start to alchemize it into ourself, where it's going to be witnessed, because the slaying of the obstacle is a very personal, but then we come on the other side of it and it now has become us, and people now feel it and respond to it, and it becomes this experience that's much more solar than lunar. So this atonement with the father, the alchemy of the Scorpio process, the ultimate boon, when we're now receiving the wisdom, we start to integrate the wisdom, because this is also the waning phase, if we consider this the lunar cycle, which I'll show in the next slide. Now, the return to the threshold is this place opposite the Cancer place, when we're here at the beginning, when we feel the call to change and grow and evolve, we have resistance. And then we have to consider that we're connected to people. We have to release bonds, or at least let them loosen, so that we can become more loosen from what people know of us, how they know us, what they're essentially connected to, if we're going to grow. So the other side here, this returning now, now we're going to reintegrate back in to our community, to our people, to ourself in a way that is now changed. And so the Capricorn, the return, we come with more authority, more personal integrity, more personal accomplishment, and we return. The Aquarius, the master of the two worlds, where we actually have realized how to be our individual, more unique self on another level and be in the world. And then Pisces is the return home, the freedom to live. So this is really beautiful. I really love this. And another way to understand this and look at this with the lunar cycle, how we begin at the new moon or the hero's journey process, where we go out and we begin this journey. It's pulling us, the quest for more, the quest for growth, the quest to evolve beyond where we are. Then we meet with self-doubt. Then we come to the last quarter, where there's an obstacle in before we get to the ultimate, which is the dragon at the full moon, the ultimate confrontation of growth. We know it's coming, but before we get to that, the first obstacle, like on the other page, where we cross the threshold, and we literally have to start to release all that we're attached to, so that when we get here, we are equipped. And so this process of the hero's journey through the lunar cycle, when we get to the full moon, it is the full realized meeting with the dragon, meeting with all that is, meeting with this bigger external reality. And we are it, we confront it, we slay the dragon of our obstacle, and then we begin the journey back home, now changed. When we get to the first quarter moon, we face that now obstacle before the absolute return, the culmination of it all. We have to yet again confront another cycle, having another initiation, having done what we said we were going to do, having confronted the obstacle and having slayed the obstacle. Where are we in consciousness? We literally have to get conscious with that. That's what the sorry, I'm going in the opposite direction, but I'm sure you guys are following me. That's what the last quarter represents, where we have now come into the fullness of an experience that has presented itself to us on the full moon, and we literally have to accept it. It's reality, it's there, it's big, it's in our face, it's happening. And then on the last quarter moon, this is the crisis in consciousness, where we have to adjust our awareness. We can't still come from the same place we were before the full moon, from the same place we were in our awareness before we slayed the dragon, before we confronted the obstacle, because we're so different. We now know that we can do it. We now know that we have what it takes. Right. So the last quarter is always this, where the first quarter is the confrontation in action. You must do something. The last quarter is the confrontation in consciousness. You need to shift how you are perceiving something, because you just went through something so major on that full moon. You went through a major lesson, whether it's a huge confrontation or slayed dragon or not. The full moons are always going to bring something into reality, bring something into the light of awareness. So now we have to adjust. We can't just still be like, I think this, I think that, this is how I relate to myself the same way before at the new moon. We are different always. And so it's a confrontation of really integrating into self that you are changed. It's a recognition of that, because what we're now carrying as far as this hero's journey, not what we're now carrying back, is more wisdom, more ability, more quality of our own awareness. And finally, we return back again during the dark moon, but we return completely different, this hero's journey, having gone through this whole process. So I found this and someone made this, and I've been working with the lunar cycle as a representation of the hero's journey that we go through for a long time. And so I really appreciated this. I wanted to share it with you all. And it really helps to, take us a little deeper into the archetypes. This is also a wonderful quote that came through this month that I loved finding. So I am going to go ahead and stop the share. And if there are any questions or anything either of you would like to share about this teaching. If not, we can close the call. Just give me a nod or a no so I know where you're at.
I had some questions as you were going through
Okay.
it. Answered them as you kept going.
Oh, good. Okay.
I got my questions answered.
BRB. Oh, be right back. Okay.
I left for a little bit, so I just put
Yeah.
that in the chat for you.
Okay. Any questions?
I'm sure they'll come, but not at the moment.
Okay. Well, I hope that was a fun experience for you.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so take care, girls. I'll see you this week. And yeah, I'll see you. The moon is on the Monday, so we'll be meeting again next Tuesday. Yeah, the chart interpretation class, I was thinking that we go a little bit into Uranus, because Uranus is squaring the full moon. So I thought we could take your charts and look at where Uranus is in relationship to the full moon. So what houses this is falling in for you, and just get a little deeper into Uranus, because I think we're all feeling it with some big changes and awarenesses coming in and all that. So yeah, and if you have any other things that you particularly might want to get into with the chart interpretation class, just let me know. I'm always open for your ideas and where you are needing to maybe focus at this time too. Because if you're trying to explore something and you're wanting to, just like move through into what it means, we can always go into that during those classes. So.
Cool. We'll keep that in mind. My friends are getting married on Monday.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting on Tuesday when we talk, to see
Yeah.
how it went. And yeah, I feel like it's already all just leading up to that point for them. So, it's like, I don't know that too much will happen on the date of. Already so much is happening just leading up to it. So
Wow. Yeah. I'm definitely interested to hear about that event from an
yeah.
astrological lens. So yeah. All right, ladies. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Thank you
Thank you
both.
so much.
Yeah.
Bye.